Hello everybody, welcome to the RxJS workshop. My name is Tracy. In this video, I'm going to show you my solution for the rainbow challenge. Before I begin showing you my solution, let's first recap how the completed rainbow application should work. And again, let me remind you that if this much color isn't very appealing to you, please do turn on your grayscale filter in your operating system while watching this video. And also, there is a grayscale checkbox that you can check in the application that will turn off and on the grayscaling of the application itself. There are essentially two parts to this challenge. The first is to have all of the color information displayed in each swatch. That is the hex value, the color name, the group to which the color belongs, as well as the R, G, and B values, that is the red, green, and blue values of the color. So the first part of the challenge is to have all of that information populate in each swatch. The second part of the challenge is to implement the filter control at the top of the screen in such a way that you're able to filter all of the colors by the methods shown in the legend below the filter control. So to filter the colors by R, G, or B values, that is red, green, or blue values, we enter first the letter R, G, or B, followed by a number between 0 and 255. So in this case, I've entered R205, which filters all of the colors whose R value is 205. To filter by hex value, we first enter a hashtag followed by a 6-digit hex color value. So to retrieve all of the colors that are black, we can enter a hashtag followed by 6 zeros. And that gives us all of the colors whose hex value match the 6-digit value that we entered. Likewise, to find all of the colors that are white, we enter a hashtag followed by 6 Fs. And that gives us all of the colors that have that hex value. To search within the names of the colors, we can enter any search text, for instance, the word gray. And what this returns is, of course, all of the colors whose name contains the word gray. We can do a fuzzy search within the color name by adding a tilde in front of the search text. And what that returns is not only those colors with the word gray in their name, but the letters G, R, A, and Y in that order, but non-contiguously. So we see also return the color bright yellow Crayola, because the word bright contains the letter G, and the word Crayola contains the remaining letters R, A, and Y. To filter by group name, we enter the word group followed by a colon, and then follow that with any of the valid group names. So for instance, to return all of the colors within the red group, we enter the text group, then the colon sign, and followed by the word red. And all of the valid group names are pipe separated within the legend. In this screen, I have the starting code in my text editor on the left-hand side and the application running in the browser on the right-hand side. So this is the starting code for the Rainbow Challenge. Now, in the initial introduction to this challenge, I did state that essentially you only needed to make changes to one file, and that is the colorservice.ts file. It's the colorservice.ts file that contains all of the observable properties that are being called by both the component and the template. And those calls to the service have already been implemented. So it wasn't really necessary to make any changes to either the template file or the component file. Essentially, you just needed to add code to the color service file. Taking a look at the browser, let's first address the missing information from the color swatches. Currently, we see only the color name and the hex value in each swatch. But remember, we also need to see the group name, the R, G, and B values, and we also need the hex value to be more visible. That is, it needs to be white so that it's visible when appearing on a dark color swatch, and it needs to be black when appearing on a light color swatch. So let's first address in our color service, let's first address retrieving all of the necessary information. Now, whenever you're presented with a coding challenge in an interview situation, first try to do a couple of things to help yourself out. And the first thing to do is to actually run the application and add some debugging tools to find out and investigate what the application is currently doing. So in this situation, it would help immensely if you added some tap operators and console logs to see what each of the supplied observables is currently doing. And if you did that, then you know that the filter text observable is emitting values that are entered in the filter control input. And you also would have found out that the colors with info observable is responsible for the display of the information within each color swatch. And lastly, the filter by observable and filtered colors observable, they are both responsible for filtering the display of colors according to the inputs that are typed into the filter control. So that's the first thing that you do whenever presented with a coding challenge. First, do some debugging, some console logging to see what each of the provided bits of code is already doing. And that gives you a sense of what needs to be done to achieve the coding challenge. The second thing to do is to take a look at the code that's already supplied within your coding challenge. So for instance, the code contains an API service as well as the color service, but there's also this shared folder which contains some utilities. So hopefully you went through some of the code in the utilities file to see what's already been provided for you. Because often in a coding challenge, the interviewer is going to provide you with some initial code that they're really not interested in seeing you perform. So in the case of this basic utils file, it contains things like comparison functions, a comparison function for the JavaScript sort array, things of that nature. And typically, an interviewer is not interested in having you code those things up. So you will be provided with a number of things to help you in the coding challenge. And in this particular coding challenge, I also provided custom pipeable operators to help you in the coding challenge so that you wouldn't have to do things that are repetitive. And it's been my experience in coding challenges that that's one of the things that an interviewer is looking for, how you go about fulfilling a given coding task. And it's very telling if before you begin a coding task, you take a look at the files that are provided. And with that said, let's first code for the information in each of the swatches. Now, we know that the colors with info observable is responsible for populating each swatch with its color information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste in my solution for coding the pipeline of the colors with info observable. So first I'll collapse this And then I'm going to paste in my solution for coding this observable. And I will add all of the imports. And now let's discuss my solution. And you see with the modification to the colors with info observable, you see that now each of the swatches contains the necessary information. They all contain their color group as well as their R, G, and B values. And each of the hex values now appears in either white or black, depending upon the background color that is the color of the swatch. So let's discuss my solution to this. Now, it would have been perfectly fine to code the colors with info observable, to code that pipeline in any way that you saw fit to achieve this particular requirement. And there is no right or wrong answer. However, had you gone through and taken a look at some of the files, you would have seen that there were some pipeable operators that could help you out in the vein of creating the pipeline code for this observable. So let's walk through each of the additions that I made. So the starting point for colors with info observable was the all name colors HTTP call from the API service. And what that returns, as you can see, is an observable of named color array. However, if you notice that each of the custom pipeable operators that I provided in the pipeable operator file, each of those pipeable operators is acting upon an individual name color, not the array of name colors. So essentially what's needed is a way to emit the individual name colors coming from the HTTP call on the API service to emit each of those individual objects. And the way that you go about that is using a from operator, which takes an array of objects and emits each of the elements within that array. It emits those individually. And you can use the from operator within a pipeline by using a higher order mapping operator such as concatMap or mergemap. In this case, I chose concatMap. So with that concatMap operation, each name color object is being emitted individually, in which case the add group, add RGB values, and add text color pipeable operators will add the necessary property to that individual name color. Now, once all of that is done, we need to now take all of our individually emitted name colored objects with all of their newly added properties. We need to return that to an array. And the way that you go about that is by calling the toArray operator. And with this, we get all of the information that's required for each of our swatches. And again, you could have coded this differently. You could have used your own mapping operators to go about this, and that would not have been incorrect. And again, there's no right or wrong answer as long as we fulfill the requirement as outlined. So now let's move on to the filtering requirement. And once again, I'm going to paste in part of my solution for the filtering process, and I'll talk you through this as well. First, I'll import some of these utility functions which appear in the utils files. And now an explanation of how I went about implementing the filter control. So notice each of the observables that I created, that I copied and pasted into this file, notice that each one of them accomplishes two things. First, they're all derived from the filter text observable. The filter text observable was provided in the startup, and essentially that filter text observable emits with each keystroke that's added to the filter control. So when an E is typed into the filter control, the letter E is emitted from the filter text observable. So each of these newly added observables are derived from filter text. The other thing that they all have in common is that each one of them emits a Boolean value. That is, they emit either true or false. And whenever filter text emits, each of these observables is going to emit because they're all derived from filter text. But only one of the observables will emit true, the value true. All of the other observables will emit false. And whether the observable emits true or false depends upon the map operator within that observable's pipeline. So notice for return all colors, the map operator returns true only if the filter text is the empty string. And of course, whenever the empty string is entered into the filter control, that is, whenever the control is cleared, we want to see all of the colors in our array displayed. We don't want them filtered. So therefore, return all colors will return true when the control is emptied. The filter by hex will return true when a valid hex color value is entered into the control. And if we take a look at this is valid hex value, if we take a peek at the definition of that, it's simply using a RegX expression to determine if a string that consists of the letters A through F or the numbers 0 through 9, because all hex color values contain either digits or the letters A through F, it tests for that type of entry. And it also tests that there are 6 characters being entered. And if that test is true, it also replaces the hashtag with an empty string. Therefore, the filter by hex observable will only emit true if the value entered into the text into the filter input is a valid hex value. Likewise, the filter by R value, filter by G value, and filter by B value, they all test whether the entry into the control begins with either an R, a G, or a B. And again, let's take a peek at one of those functions and notice they too are using RegX expressions, RegX expression tests to determine if the entry begins with an R, a G, or a B, and there are 1 to 3 digits following that R, G, or B. And in that way, filter by R value, filter by G value, and filter by B value will all return true if there is valid function returns true. Filter by group searches for the presence of the word group and a colon in the input text. And filter by fuzzy searches for the tilde at the beginning of the input text. And there can be an occasion where the return of each of these observables, they're all false, in which case that would result in the default filtering operation. And that's the filtering of all of the names by the search text. Now that we have all of these observables in place, we can move on to the filter by observable. And if you remember, the filter by observable has one requirement, and that is to use the zip operator to derive that observable. And the reason that I steered you towards using the zip operator is because the zip operator is a creation operator, a join creation operator that emits a value when all of its observable inputs emits their values. It will emit that first value when all of its observable inputs emits their first value. It will emit its second value when all of its observable inputs emits their second value, and so on. And that's essentially why I coded these observables to emit whenever the filter text observable emits. That ensures that when return all colors emits its first value, filter by hex will emit its first value, filter by R value will emit its first value, and so on. When return all colors emits its second value, all of the others will emit their second value. When return all colors emits its third value, all of the others will emit their third value. And this is because they are all derived from the filter text observable. With each emission from filter text, they will all in turn emit. And that makes it possible for us to use the zip operator. So essentially, I need only pass in all of those observables. And I'll copy and paste the rest of them in to save time. And now what will happen is with each emission from filter text, filter by will emit a value. And that's because each of the observable parameters passed into this zip operator, they will all emit as well. So with that, now we have our filter by observable in place. We can now do two things. We can uncomment the filter by and our filtered colors observable. And now we need only add standard vanilla JavaScript code in our map operator to take care of the filtering of our colors according to the entry into the filter control. And I'll just copy and paste all of that code in as well. And now our filtering control will work as prescribed. Awesome. And again, this is just the code that's within the map operator is your standard vanilla JavaScript code consisting of the JavaScript array filter function to do the appropriate filtering action upon the all colors array. So that's it. That is my solution to the rainbow coding challenge. And again, if your solution looks different, that's perfectly acceptable. That is the beauty of the RxJS library. We can, using a combination of various different operators, and achieve the same outcome. So I hope you enjoyed this coding challenge, and I hope you do get the takeaway from something other than just coding. And that is when we are tasked with some coding task, take a look at your starting point. Take a look at what's provided for you, what's provided to you before starting the coding challenge. And in that way, you can save yourself some time and effort by not creating what's already there for you. And until our next coding challenge, this is Tracy from the RxJS workshop. Keep on coding. If you'd like to take a look at the code for my solution to the coding challenge, you can find it in the repo for this coding challenge under the commit with the message solution. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. And to stay updated on the latest content from the RxJS workshop, please subscribe to the channel. Do you want to learn more about the RxJS library and many of its features? Please check out my course on the Udemy platform. It's called RxJS Subjects and Operators, What They Do and When to Use Them. You can find the course by clicking on this link on the channel page. Thanks again for tuning in to the RxJS workshop.